Welcome to Spaces Organized and Styled, the podcast. My name is Caitlin Atkins, and I am an organization expert and life coach. I am the professional organizer to help you get those goals achieved and work through any life challenges that come up along the way. If you're wanting to declutter your home, your office, your schedule, or your life, then you have found the right place for you. In this podcast, I will share with you the tips, the tricks, and the processes to help you get organized, stay organized, and share some life wisdom along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone. So I have a question here that says, what does a professional organizer do? Or what a professional organizer does? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you all the things that we do in this industry and some of the things that we don't do. So the first thing that we do, if a client is to call or to reach out or say that they need a professional organizer, the very first thing that needs to happen is a professional organizer needs to assess if it's a great fit or if it's going to be a good fit. Now, the thing of that is that not every client is a good fit for that professional organizer, and not every professional organizer is a good fit for that client. If I was, for example, to have a client to call me and say, I need to move internationally for whatever reason. Can you come and declutter and organize my house? The decluttering and organizing the house component, yes, absolutely. The moving abroad and arranging all of those logistics that come into place with that, not so much. That is a much larger capacity that I don't have right now. I could refer you to companies who absolutely could do those things, but it would not be a good fit for either the client or myself to kind of take that job on. The next thing that we're going to do if we find that we could potentially be a good fit and that it's going to work well is we need to assess the situation. So if a client's to call me and say, I have a whole home that I need to get organized, or I have a bedroom that I need to get organized, I need to assess what is actually going on there. Is it the one room that they called me about that they need to get organized, or is it the entire home that needs to get organized? If they call me and say that their living room needs to get organized, is it really the living room, or could it be potentially the playroom, the kids' toys that have overflowed into the living room? Does that need to get organized, and is that actually what needs to happen? So an organizer is going to create a plan. They're going to assess the situation, and they're going to form a plan based on their assessment about what actually needs to happen. So that's going to be a plan of, this is everything that I saw in the home, this is everything that I saw in the business, or it could be everything that is non-tangible. That's going to be things that are potentially a schedule that needs to be decluttered and organized. And the professional organizer is going to create a plan based on that to get the client really organized from A to Z. So they're going to create a plan. They're going to make sure that the client is aware of the plan, that they align with the plan, that this happens a lot. If I go in for an assessment and I do a whole home assessment and we walk through all the spaces, sometimes the client forgets a particular area that we overlooked. So we're going to go through the whole home. We're going to go room by room. We're going to talk about everything, what their goals are for each room. But sometimes things, in the heat of the moment and the activity, they just kind of forget. So if I create a plan, I create an assessment, the client needs to sign off on that, and usually they'll have an additional idea that we didn't talk about during the assessment that they want to add back in. Totally fine. So we want to make sure that we're aligned and we're on the same goals and path. The last thing that you want to do is, start climbing a ladder that is not leading you to the direction that you want to go in. That also means that we also need to be very flexible, and we need to be able to pivot. What I mean by that is sometimes I go into a home and a client is not sure if they want to sell or if they're going to stay. So I need to have the flexibility, and a professional organizer does, to pivot based upon what the client ends up and ultimately decides. Now that could be, we start the decluttering process, we start the phase, we start doing the work, and then they eventually, shift their mind and they say, no, I actually am going to stay. So we need to form the organizing sessions based upon that home. Or they could say, no, I actually want to move, so I need to be able to have the flexibility to pivot to, okay, now we are packing everything up and this client is now moving. Either way is fine, just having flexibility is what a professional organizer needs to do. Also having the ability to call in additional support when needed. And this is, if we just use the example of selling a home. If a client wants to sell a home and they have a multitude of things that actually need to be tied up, all those loose ends, the professional organizer needs to have all of that additional support and all of the contacts to be able to be the go-to person for that client. So I would say that all of the professional organizers, they need to have the ability to call in additional organizers if needed, to call in packers, to call in movers, painters, landscapers, cleaners, flooring, electrician, plumbing, all of those things. You should have in the repertoire all of these contacts, and not just one. You need to have a multitude of them, ranging in different prices, abilities, because even if somebody was, you were to recommend a cleaner to a company, to a client, that doesn't necessarily mean that the cleaning crew has the ability to take on that additional client at that moment. It could also be way outside of their price range that the client is just not able to incorporate that company into their current situation. So you want to make sure that you don't just have one, you actually have very many. You have a couple, and you're vetted and trusted, and that you would recommend them no matter what. You know they're going to do great work. So you want to make sure that you have the additional support. You also want to make sure that you actually do the work. So the next thing after you've got your assessment, you've figured out, do I need to call in a plumber? Do I need to call in a painter? You've talked to the client about this. It's about getting down and doing the nitty-gritty work and actually doing the decluttering and organizing. So that would be either doing it solo or doing it with the client and their family. I take the business approach to doing it with the clients. I find that I am actually working myself out of a job, which is the best thing. If a client has the ability to take on the skills and the education component themselves, that is way better than constantly being the go-to person to help that client get organized. So absolutely, you want to be transferring those skills. You want to be doing the work with the client. You also want to make sure that you're not missing anything from the client, that the client is present, and that you could potentially be telling them that a certain particular item needs to be removed from the home, but that is actually a very sentimental thing. And this is where mistakes come in, is if a client is not involved in the process, they're not going to remember, they're not going to recall certain things that leave the home. You might be getting phone calls later on saying, whatever happened with that one thing? And you could say, you donated that. You don't want to be doing that. So a professional organizer is going to be doing the work. They're going to be doing it most of the time with the client. That comes into doing it at the pace of the client. This is big. So we, as an industry standard, would typically not ever rush the organizing process. I don't in my business, because I need to make sure that the clients are processing whatever is coming up. And that means that if they were to get rid of something, that they are processing whatever emotions need to be processed with that. Sometimes it's nothing, it's just no big deal. Other times, very small, insignificant things to other people are actually very sentimental. So this could be something that was left from a parent or a grandparent who has passed, or a family member. It could be something that is left from a spouse. It could have a very significant meaning. It could be, for example, if you have a baseball cap. This baseball cap to anybody else would have no significant sentimental value. But to the client, it could potentially have a whole impact. It could have a wealth of memories that if you're just not the client, you don't know. So making sure that you're giving space for the client to process anything and to work through any emotions that come up, that's really, really important. So we want to make sure that we're going at the pace of the client. If we need to take breaks, we're taking breaks. If they are overwhelmed or exhausted, if they feel like we're just moving too quickly, things are leaving the home faster than what they're able to process with, that's big as well. That is something that I find in clients who have hoarding tendencies. If they are conditioned and used to having things around them and surrounding them, and now all of a sudden an organizer is coming in and we're taking things out, we need to make sure that we're taking them out at this pace that the client feels comfortable with and can adjust, so that way they don't go back to the way that it was. The last thing you want is to do all the work just for them to wind up back in the same position. If you do have a client with hoarding tendencies, or if you're a client with hoarding tendencies, you want to make sure that you have an additional support there, that you're calling in your therapist or psychiatrist, that they are there working with you, because again, it's horrible to invest all of the time, energy, and money in professional organizing to get organized only to wind up in the exact same spot. So you want to make sure that you've got the support there that you need to work through that and to move on. So like I said, we're going to adjust as needed. So that's adjusting the pace, it's adjusting the project scope. So if we have recognized that there is a little bit of scope creep, we're going to reel that back in or incorporate that into the contract or the work, and adjust as needed. Things will come up and we need to be flexible to accommodate those things. A professional organizer is going to find and implement the correct solutions for the client. And so keeping in mind that not everybody is a cookie cutter approach, that everybody organizes see things completely different. For example, this is a great example. I love walking into a home and seeing the way that partners or spouses organize, because they're typically not going to be this exact same way. So you will find that some people find and take their medications in their bathroom. Some people find and take their medications in the kitchen. So even just as simple as that is a complete polar opposite approach. And when an organizer comes in and says, okay, well, I've noticed that we've scattered our medication, that we've got some in the bathroom, we've got some in the kitchen, maybe in a linen closet. It's all over the place. And so we need to find and implement the correct solutions for that family and for that client. So if you are somebody who grew up taking your medications in the bathroom, most likely that's where your medications are going to live. If you're somebody who grew up taking them in the kitchen, that's where you're going to find them. It's so interesting to see the way that people have their homes laid out. And so really being careful to not implement a cookie cutter approach, because I couldn't go in and organize particularly to what I'm used to or what I've done in the past for other clients, because that's not going to work for everybody. So really making sure that it's tailored, curated for that specific client, for their needs, for their the way that they move around in their home. Also keeping in mind that, if you've got medications that are down low, but the client has young children, you don't want them to have access or accidentally get into anything. So if you're looking at that as far as a linen closet, you want to make sure that anything that's medication-wise is up high, whereas the Band-Aids could be a little bit lower, because although it would, be quite comical to walk in and see a toddler, stickered in Band-Aids, it's not going to be dangerous if they had gotten into some medication. So really tailor the way that the client moves in their home. So that's big. The last and final thing that a professional organizer is going to do for their clients is they're going to create a maintenance plan or a way to stay organized. Again, the last thing that a good professional organizer is going to want is to come back and do the same work over and over again. Because then that means that you didn't do your job in the first place, that you didn't transfer your skills to the client, and that the client is lacking in some way. Now, don't take that as if you've got a more drawn out process that is failure. No, by no means. If you have a established relationship with your professional organizer that lasts weeks, months, years, that's perfectly fine. The last thing that is not the same thing as doing the work, getting organized, the professional organizer leaves, and then you go back to the exact same way that you were. Or you are left with questions on how to maintain it. You are left with questions on how to stay organized. So this means that the professional organizer needs to create a maintenance plan. They need to put in place a plan of action. And that could be, depending again on the client, we're not going to use a cookie cutter approach. That could be every quarter, you're going to go through your papers in your office and you're going to declutter and shred and file them. It could be every month, every week, depending upon the volume. Again, depending upon how much papers and files you have. This is a big one for, let's say, just mail. Mail is one of those things that I talk about because it keeps coming. It's never going to stop. You will always have mail coming into your home. How you maintain that, what process and system you put in place to accommodate that is not going to be the same for everybody. And so really making sure that you have a maintenance plan. Your maintenance plan could be every day you're going to tackle the mail that comes in. The junk mail is going to go in the trash. The papers that need to be dealt with are going to go, either you're going to deal with them there, right then and there, or you're going to put them aside and you're going to deal with them at a particular day of the week, or every couple weeks, or at the end of a month, or end of a quarter. I don't recommend those get too long, but you could, whatever the client recommends or whatever the client feels is going to be suitable for their schedule and their lifestyle. So putting those dates in the calendar, saying, okay, every Thursday I look in the mail at 5:00, or making sure that they are cleaning out their closet every spring. They are cleaning out their closet and doing a clothes purge at the end of every season. Whatever it may be, the professional organizer needs to give them a maintenance plan and a schedule that they can stick with, that they can keep organized to. Now, again, the maintenance plan is not set in stone. It's not like we wrote it down and it has to stay this way till the end of time. If it changes, that's perfectly fine, just as long as the client feels that they are maintaining their level of organization. Just had a thought here that I did not write down in my notes. There is a thing called backsliding. Now, so let's say your professional organizer came, did the work, and they left, they gave you the plan. You're like, yep, absolutely, I'm sticking with this. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to call this person back. I feel empowered and motivated. Wonderful. A couple months go by, couple weeks, couple days, whatever it may be, depending upon the room, depending on how quickly the items are accessed. There is a thing called backsliding, and this is a theory that happens in professional organizing when a professional organizer leaves and the client goes back to the way that they were. On some degree, I'm not saying completely, I'm not saying they go back to 100% the way they were, but there will be some part of it that shifts back. It could be 5%, it could be 2%, it could be 20%. Whatever it may be, as long as they're not going back 100% to the way that they were prior to the professional organizer coming in, that's okay. And if you need to call your professional organizer back, they should have a maintenance option for you. They should have a way for you to call them back to say, hey, I know we organized my pantry. I know we organized my kitchen. It just doesn't work for me anymore. It never worked. I thought it would work. We did all this, research into what would work best for me, but it's just not working. That is absolutely fine. And you should be calling your professional organizer back in to get it correctly set for you and your family and your needs. So all of those things are what professional organizers do. I hope that answers the question on what a professional organizer does. There's a little bit, of a gray area there as well, as far as, I don't want to call it, therapist or psychiatrist by any means, because if your professional organizer is not skilled and trained and certified in those areas, they should absolutely not be doing that. But it is interesting to see how clients, they share a lot when you're in their home. They are talking to you. You're going through their things. You're working with them. You are their buddy. You're side by side, especially in a traumatic event. You are that person who's showing up every single day or every single couple days and doing the work with them. So yeah, you are almost like a life coach in some aspect. You're helping them achieve their goals and getting them to the next phase of their life. So all of those things. All right, so I hope that answered your question. I will see you guys all next time. Have a great day. Bye. Hey, did you love that episode and want to dive in deeper?